Thank you for listening. This course was created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional podcasts, books, newsletters, and cool merchandise await. Let's get started. Context filtering is the discipline of screening retrieved passages before they ever reach the generator, keeping only material that is truly relevant to the user's question and safe to quote. In retrieval-augmented systems, documents arrive with mixed quality, mixed intent, and mixed formatting. Filtering is the first defense that separates signal from noise. Practically, it asks 3 questions. Does this passage answer the query? Is it trustworthy enough to include? Could it contain adversarial instructions or poison that would steer the model? By enforcing these gates up front, you reduce cognitive load on the model, shrink the attack surface for prompt injection, and lower latency by avoiding bloated contexts. Think of filtering as a bouncer and a librarian working together. One keeps out mischief and off-topic guests. The other shelves only the volumes that directly support the conversation you are about to have. Effective filtering blends simple and sophisticated methods to capture different failure modes. Keyword and pattern matching catches obvious misfits, boilerplate navigation, disclaimers, cookie banners, and code blocks that do not answer anything. Semantic similarity thresholds compare query and passage embeddings to ensure the gist aligns rather than merely sharing vocabulary, while cosine distance cutoffs avoid dragging in passages that are near but not about the task. Reliability scoring layers in provenance, source domain reputation, document freshness, and authorship signals produce a prior that downranks anonymous or stale materials. Finally, rule-based rejection bans risky constructs outright, such as embedded instructions, ignore previous directions, high-entropy secrets, or executable fragments. The trick is orchestration. Stage cheap lexical filters early, apply semantic tests to survivors, and reserve heavier checks for flows that matter most, so defenses help, rather than become their own performance bottleneck. Grounding is the complementary practice of verifying that the model's proposed answer is anchored in the retrieved evidence. Instead of trusting fluent text, you ask the system to prove each claim by pointing to passages that support it. Grounding reframes generation as evidence-backed synthesis, reducing hallucinations by making unsupported statements less likely to pass the gate. Importantly, it applies after context filtering. Once you have a curated, safe set of passages, grounding checks whether the output actually rests on them. This shift changes incentives for decoding. Models learn that factual, citable phrasing is rewarded, while confident speculation gets discarded. In human terms, grounding is the habit of quoting your sources. It is not a guarantee of truth. Bad sources can still mislead, but it is a strong guarantee against unmoored invention, which is where the most embarrassing and risky failures tend to originate. There are several practical approaches to grounding, each contributing a different reliability lens. Cross-checking with a trusted corpus forces the model to triangulate claims against vetted repositories, policy manuals, approved knowledge bases, or curated datasets, so single questionable passages cannot carry an answer. Entailment classification operates at the sentence level. Candidate claims are paired with retrieved sentences and labeled as supported, contradicted, or unrelated, rejecting those without textual evidence. Multi-source verification requires agreement across at least 2 independent documents for high-risk statements, mitigating the danger of a single poisoned shard. Consistency scoring evaluates whether numeric values, entity names, and timelines align across the retrieved set, downgrading answers that weave incompatible facts. Used together, these checks do not slow the model so much as they shape its behavior, nudging it toward conservative, reference-driven language that is measurably easier to audit. Without filtering, retrieval becomes a conduit for manipulation. Prompt injection hidden in documents can slip past the model's guardrails by arriving as trusted context, instructing it to reveal secrets, call tools, or output unsafe content. Irrelevant context crowds the window, diluting genuinely helpful passages until the generator drifts toward vague or generic answers. Hallucinations rise because the model cannot see clear evidence. It fills gaps with prior patterns. Bias amplifies when overrepresented sources dominate rankings, subtly steering tone and conclusions. Even benign clutter harms. Boilerplate headers and repetitive footers waste tokens and attention, increasing cost while lowering clarity. Skipping filtering is like allowing any flyer to be taped over your reference desk. Eventually, the important notices are buried under noise and a few cleverly placed scams, and readers start taking directions from whoever shouted the loudest. Without grounding, fluent text wears the mask of authority even when it is wrong. Unsupported factual claims slip through because nothing checks whether a sentence maps to evidence. Citations, if present, may point to documents that do not actually contain the stated fact. Compliance failures follow when regulated assertions, health advice, legal interpretations, financial figures lack traceable backing, making audits contentious and remediation expensive. Users lose trust quickly. A single polished but false answer can sour adoption more than several honest "I don't know" responses. Internally, teams struggle to debug errors because there is no breadcrumb trail from claim to passage. Every incident becomes a hunt through logs and hunches. Grounding does not eliminate mistakes, but it forces them to be mistakes of interpretation rather than invention, and that difference matters profoundly for accountability, safety, and the speed with which you can correct course. Filtering introduces unavoidable trade-offs that must be tuned deliberately rather than wished away. Tight thresholds improve precision by excluding marginal passages, but they also reduce recall and can reject useful edge cases where the right answer is phrased unusually. Looser filters bring context richness and improve coverage, yet they increase the risk of admitting irrelevant or adversarial text. Each additional check adds latency and compute, which matters at scale and during traffic spikes. Practical teams instrument these costs, compare precision at K and answer accuracy with filters on and off, track how many requests fall back due to overfiltering, and set adaptive thresholds based on query risk. For high-stakes flows, you may accept slower responses and stricter gates. For low-risk FAQs, you might prefer speed and breadth. The goal is explicitly chosen operating points that reflect business consequences, not one-size-fits-all knobs that drift over time. Grounding brings its own compromises. Verifying every claim against evidence adds components entailment models, retrieval over retrieval, cross-source voting, that increase system complexity and potential points of failure. Dependence on external sources introduces fragility. If an authoritative corpus is stale or temporarily unavailable, strict grounding can incorrectly reject correct answers, degrading user experience. Some entailment classifiers are conservative, downvoting paraphrases or domain-specific phrasing that humans would accept, leading to reduced coverage in nuanced topics. Conversely, permissive settings can pass borderline claims that later prove disputable. The remedy is calibrated policy, tier grounding strictness by risk class, cache-vetted snippets for hot topics, and expose confidence scores to callers so they can decide when to escalate. Periodically audit false rejections and false acceptances with human review, and refine templates so the generator naturally produces evidence-friendly statements that pass checks without contortion. Operationalizing context filtering starts with a clear, modular pipeline. Pre-processing normalizes text, removing navigation Chrome, standardizing encodings, splitting into semantically coherent chunks, so filters operate on clean units. A staged filter chain follows. Lightweight lexical rules prune obvious noise. Semantic similarity scoring selects candidates. Reliability scorers weight provenance. And rule-based rejection ejects risky constructs. Integrate this chain tightly with retrieval so filters can adjust K, re-rank candidates, or request alternate shards when initial picks fail. Provide automated fallbacks. If filtering yields too little context, the system can broaden similarity thresholds, query a trusted fallback corpus, or return a clarifying question rather than hallucinating. Make components swappable behind interfaces so you can upgrade a scorer or add a new detector without rewriting the pipeline. Finally, surface filter decisions in logs for later tuning. What was rejected, why, and what replaced it. Grounding effectiveness is assessed by how often claims are correctly supported, not by how confident the model sounds. Establish factual accuracy benchmarks with gold standard, evidence-linked questions, and score answers using both automated entailment and human adjudication for ambiguous cases. Audit disputed outputs from production user reports, low-confidence responses, or regulatory topic answers, and trace each claim to its cited passages to classify failures, missing evidence, misread evidence, or poisoned evidence. Integrate user feedback loops that allow not-supported flags with minimal friction, and reward precision by routing frequent reporters into a trusted reviewer program. Run regular evaluation cycles where grounding thresholds, entailment models, and citation styles are updated together, and publish dashboards that show supported claim rates by domain and risk class. The aim is steady movement toward higher evidence adherence without collapsing usability when sources are imperfect. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Resilience testing treats your pipeline like an adversary would. Craft retrieval challenges that lure in off-topic yet plausible snippets and measure whether filters downrank them. Inject documents with prompt injection patterns, ignore prior instructions, and track activation rates after filtering and grounding. Build poisoned fact templates numbers off by a digit, plausible but wrong dates, swapped entity names, and score how often grounding catches the mismatch. Replay corrupted index scenarios in staging to validate rollback and quarantine. For each test, record not just pass/fail, but where failure occurred: ingestion, retrieval, filtering, grounding, or validation, so fixes target the right stage. Report resilience metrics next to relevance metrics. Precision at K is incomplete without injection neutralization rate or unsupported claim rejection rate. Over time, grow a living suite that reflects the tricks seen in production and run it on every code and corpus change so defenders learn as quickly as attackers iterate. Scalability demands that defenses keep pace with corpus size and query volume without collapsing under their own weight. Large indexes require distributed filtering. Push cheap lexical and metadata screens to the retrieval edge, then apply semantic checks only to shortlisted candidates. Cache outcomes. If a passage repeatedly fails grounding for a topic, avoid selecting it for similar queries, and pre-compute reliability scores, so hot documents do not trigger redundant work. Batch heavy entailment checks, allocate latency budgets per risk class, and degrade gracefully. When under load, tighten whitelists for regulated domains while loosening non-critical niceties elsewhere. Observe resource overhead directly: CPU for re-rankers, GPU for entailment, memory for context assembly, and right-size clusters accordingly. Sharding by tenant or domain reduces blast radius and enables per-segment tuning. The goal is predictable performance where safety is never the first knob turned down when dashboards turn red. Cross-disciplinary alignment keeps context filtering and grounding anchored in organizational reality. Machine learning teams bring retrieval quality and model behavior. Security operations contribute threat models, abuse signals, and incident playbooks. Governance and legal translate regulations into enforceable policies and evidence expectations. Together they define accuracy policies, what counts as supported, which topics require multi-source corroboration, when to abstain, and set review cadences tied to business risk. Regular committees examine metrics, disputed outputs, and upcoming corpus changes, approving adjustments to thresholds and whitelists. Shared vocabulary matters. Engineers see unsupported claim rate, auditors see evidence adherence, and product sees user trust. All three should point to the same dashboards. When roles and signals interlock, filtering and grounding cease to be side projects. They become part of how the organization defines quality, manages risk, and proves responsibility to customers and regulators. Strategically, context filtering is one of your best defenses against disinformation because it controls what the model is allowed to read. RAG systems draw on living corpora that can be seeded with hoaxes, propaganda, or coordinated influence pieces engineered to rank well in retrieval. By screening for provenance, freshness, and adversarial markers, and by whitelisting vetted collections for high-risk topics, you prevent the generator from laundering falsehoods into fluent, authoritative prose. Filtering also dampens amplification. Even if a crafted article slips into a long-tail source, it will not repeatedly surface across queries that share only superficial overlap. For public-facing assistance, add editorial guardrails, topic gates for elections, health, or crisis information, conservative defaults when confidence is low, and clear citations so readers can inspect sources directly. The payoff is reputational resilience. When the environment becomes noisy or adversarial, your system continues to answer from evidence rather than from whoever shouted loudest online. Context filtering and grounding also anchor enterprise trust, the kind you need to win internal adoption at scale. Business stakeholders are comfortable when answers are reproducible, traceable, and abstain rather than speculate. Grounded responses do that. They come with citations to approved repositories, extractable spans that support key claims, and confidence scores that product teams can route through escalation rules. Filtering reduces embarrassing errors that sour pilots, off-topic passages, boilerplate clutter, or stray instructions that make outputs look arbitrary. Together they convert AI magic into a governed capability with dials you can explain to executives. Stricter filters yield fewer unsupported claims. Relaxed filters improve coverage with measured risk. Publish dashboards that expose supported claim rate, source mix, and rejection reasons so leaders see the system learning responsibly over time. Trust grows when you can show not just that the model works, but how and why it chose the words it gave. Compliance alignment is another strategic lever. Many regulations demand traceability, data minimization, and evidence for consequential outputs. Grounding produces an auditable trail from claim to source, simplifying reviews under privacy and consumer protection rules and supporting records retention policies. Context filtering enforces minimization by excluding sensitive or out-of-scope passages before they touch the generator, reducing the chance that personal data appears in logs or responses. Provenance tags and signed ingestion manifests feed data protection impact assessments. Per-tenant indexes and access controls map cleanly to confidentiality obligations. Redaction policies propagate into validation layers that block unsupported or sensitive content from leaving the system. When auditors ask, "How do you know this answer is permitted?" you can point to controls that are codified, measured, and versioned. Compliance stops being an after-the-fact scramble and becomes a property of the pipeline, which in turn accelerates approvals for new use cases. From a security posture perspective, filtering and grounding shorten the adversary's kill chain. Prompt embedded instructions lose traction when your filters strip or downrank documents containing them. Even if a few slip through, grounding rejects outputs that follow unsupported directives. Re-ranking and trimming shrink the surface for context window overflow and reduce opportunities to bury payloads under long, irrelevant text. Downstream, validation enforces structure and policy, making it harder for injection attempts to trigger tool calls or leak sensitive data. These layers complement identity, rate limiting, and anomaly detection by reducing the value of each successful retrieval manipulation and by generating rich telemetry rejection reasons, unsupported claim flags that feed incident response. The net effect is graceful degradation. When pressure rises, the system returns conservative, citable fragments or abstains entirely rather than producing confident, exploitable mistakes. Security improves not by secrecy, but by shaping behavior toward verifiable, low-risk answers. This episode focused on two pillars of retrieval-augmented generation security: context, filtering, and grounding. We defined filtering as the first line of defense that screens retrieved passages for relevance, reliability, and adversarial markers, and grounding as the practice of verifying that each claim in the answer is backed by evidence. We explored risks when either is absent, the trade-offs they introduce, and how to operationalize them with pipelines, monitoring, validation, and governance. Strategically, these controls prevent disinformation, build enterprise trust, align with compliance expectations, and strengthen your overall security posture. As you expand RAG, treat filtering and grounding as paved road requirements rather than optional add-ons. Next, we turn to agent security, where models orchestrate tools and actions and extend these ideas to plan-execute loops, tool permissioning, and defenses against instruction hijacking that can move from words to real-world effects if left unchecked. Thanks for tuning in to Bare Metal Cyber, your trusted source for cybersecurity educational materials, news, and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.